Welcome! This is Dr. Storyteller. This story isn't for the faint of heart. If you dare, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare for the most chilling horror experience of your life. The Silent Watcher. The house had been empty for years, sitting at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a small town. It wasn't run down or abandoned. On the outside, it looked perfectly ordinary. But locals knew better. They avoided it. The stories surrounding the house were enough to make people turn the other way. Enough to make the bravest hearts skip a beat. The last family to live there had vanished without a trace, but no one ever spoke of it. In 1994, a young couple, Sarah and Mark, decided to move in. Newlyweds, full of hope, they were excited to start their lives in what seemed to be their dream home. It was affordable, spacious, and quiet. Perfect for raising a family, they thought. But they didn't ask why. It was so affordable. From the very first night, strange things started happening. Late at night, Sarah would hear soft footsteps moving down the hall. She thought it was just Mark, restless from the stress of the move. But when she reached over in bed to ask him about it, he was fast asleep. It became routine. Footsteps, creaking floorboards, sometimes faint tapping on the walls. Mark reassured her it was just the house settling. Nothing more. But then, Sarah started noticing something far more unsettling. No matter where she was in the house, she felt like she was being watched. The feeling of cold eyes boring into her back. An unsettling presence that always seemed to be just out of sight. She shrugged it off at first, thinking she was just stressed, overthinking. But then, it became undeniable. One evening, as Sarah was folding laundry in the bedroom, she glanced out the window. There, across the street, she saw a figure standing on the sidewalk, tall, motionless, and staring directly at the house. At her. It was too dark to see his face, but his silhouette was clear against the dim streetlight. "Mark," she called, her voice trembling. "There's someone outside." Mark came to the window, but by the time he looked out, the figure was gone. "Just some weirdo," he said, trying to ease her nerves. "Maybe a neighbor. Nothing to worry about." But Sarah knew it wasn't a neighbor. She felt it deep in her bones. Whoever, or whatever that was, it wasn't just passing by. The figure appeared again the next night, and the night after that, always standing perfectly still, always watching. But whenever Mark looked, he was gone. Sarah became consumed with paranoia, convinced that something was wrong. She avoided looking out the windows after dark and started keeping all the curtains closed. But the feeling never left. The footsteps in the house grew louder, more frequent. Sometimes Sarah swore she could hear breathing. Soft, slow breaths that weren't hers or Mark's. One night, unable to sleep, she crept downstairs for a glass of water. As she reached the bottom step, she froze. There, standing in the middle of the living room, was the same dark figure she had seen outside. Motionless, watching. Her heart pounded in her chest as she backed away, stumbling over her words. "Mark! Mark!" The figure didn't move. It just stood there, silent. The air was thick with dread. Suddenly, Mark came rushing down the stairs. But by the time he reached her side, the figure had vanished. "I saw it!" Sarah cried, trembling. "I saw it right there." Mark searched the house top to bottom, but there was no sign of an intruder. No open windows, no unlocked doors. But Sarah knew. She knew. Something was in the house with them. The next morning, Sarah insisted they call the previous owner. She couldn't live with the unknown anymore. When Mark finally got through, the voice on the other end of the line was hesitant. The previous owner admitted that they had sold the house because of strange occurrences. Footsteps in the night, lights flickering, cold drafts in rooms with no windows. But it wasn't until they found strange writing carved into the walls of the basement that they decided to leave. The words were faint, as if scratched into the plaster by something inhuman. The message, "He's always watching." Sarah's blood ran cold. That night, determined to get to the bottom of it, Mark went into the basement alone. He took a flashlight, determined to find the carvings. He was skeptical, still trying to convince himself that Sarah was overreacting. But when he found the carvings, he froze. There, in the far corner of the basement, were the words. But they weren't faint. They were fresh. And beneath them, the unmistakable outline of a figure. Tall, shadowy, watching. Mark stumbled back, panic rising in his chest. As he turned to run up the stairs, the flashlight flickered and went out. In the pitch-black darkness, Mark heard it. Breathing. Deep, slow breaths, close enough to feel.